Good evening and welcome to the Dark Side with me, Tabitha Purple, and Mr. Storm. How are you doing?
I'm great. I'm always great.
Good. Well, for those of us who are in the middle of a heat wave in Europe, I wish you the best of times. It is very hot out here in this European things. There are fires. There are plastic glass issues, there are water shortages, and temperatures are set to soar into beyond the 30s, into the 40s throughout the whole of Europe. So be careful, slow down, take your time, find your shade. Be mindful of those around you, check on your elderly neighbors and loved ones. Do what you can. It's crazy out here. Okay. So there's some general information, of course. And for those of you who are in the summer vacation period and are very excited and are going to get on a plane, good luck. Air travel around the world is almost ground into a halt regularly. Airports are not coping with the number of passengers that are traveling post-COVID, and they're having real problems. And so we wish you the best of luck with all of that. But for tonight, our last episode of The Dark Side for this season 5 will be back with us in September. But for now, we are going to finish off with a jam-packed show full of lots and lots of news stories. Are you excited?
About?
Talking about all the different news stories we've got coming up.
Oh, yeah, sure.
All right, so let's just kick it off. We'll do some American news and then we'll branch out around the world as always. If you have any comments, questions, want to add anything to the show, please do put that into the comments section. We appreciate talking with you, especially as this is our roundup show for the year before we head into our summer break and therefore have time to have a little bit of a recoup, revitalize, and be ready to go in September. So I keep getting ready to say December for some reason, but it's September. We will be back. All right, first story comes out of the US and Saudi Arabia. Biden is on his first tour in the Middle East, and he is seen giving a fist bump to the now Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman on his visit. This is very controversial since Biden had called him a pariah, refused to go visit, said he will not, as president, do certain things. And now, of course, with the world's climate the way that it is, with wars, with all of the things that are going on across the globe, and especially with tensions running high between the US and Russia, now is the time when we can put aside all of those feelings and go see the Crown Prince. What I found interesting is, and really inexcusable in some ways, and a bit rich, is that news reporters are asking, don't you feel lucky that you've had Biden come and visit, considering, that you are against things like modernization and freedom of speech, activism, dissent. All of these things are punishable in your country. People are not free. And I had to smile and say, yes, but in the last year on the dark side, we have reported on pretty much every European country changing its laws to restrict, to stop, to slow down the use of protests, the use of any sort of outspoken methodology of protesting its government is being restricted every single, this whole year. We've seen lots of laws come through, particularly from the UK, but other European countries and the US passing different laws to minimize this. And then you got the nerve to go to the Middle East and be like, yeah, so y'all are not doing your job. Your people are not free. Did he not turn around and be like, look at your own country first? I'm just saying. So it's an interesting story in that it brings together a few things about politics in which there is a lot of hypocrisy. And as people that have integrity, when we see these things, we should really take a step back and not go with our xenophobic or racist or anti-Muslim ideologies or whatever we have and say, well, hold on. Are our governments not doing exactly what they're claiming that this government is doing? How different are we really, and how free are we really? That's my take on it. Mr. Storm, any words?
I woke up this morning and I chose violence. It's just white people doing white people stuff.
Oh, I see.
Let's not beat about the bush here, because did the UK not just pass a whole bunch of laws making protests more difficult? Basically, if you made someone feel uncomfortable in your protest, and that could be they found the noise too loud, your protest is deemed illegal and it's shut down, and the police come in and they come in very heavy handed.
Mhm.
I'm sorry, why isn't Boris Johnson a pariah? Why weren't you calling Boris Johnson a pariah? Hmm? The police in France have long had a history of abusing protesters.
Mhm.
Why wasn't Macron or any of his predecessors regarded as social pariahs?
Mhm.
Seems to me that the only people that are called pariahs by white Western leaders and white owned media outlets are those that won't pass a paper bag test.
One day we'll have to really unpack the paper bag test. But for those of you that don't know, it's when they used to hold a paper bag up to people and be like, "You're darker than a brown paper bag, so therefore,"
Right?
yes.
You know, as I said, there's all of these things going on, and
Mm. Mm.
you know, you look at the police killing civilians. Right now, this year, police in the US have killed more than one person a day.
And
Right?
again, it's a lot of nerve to have that level of problem in your own country, and then turn around to another country and say, "Well, but you have these problems, same problems you have. You have these problems, therefore I find that I'm not going to deal with you."
And
Until there is a global shortage, or until there's a global issue with communications with your other person you don't like, and then all of a sudden we can wave all of those things magically and we'll start talking to you again.
oh,
It is ridiculous.
it's for me, it's look, you're going to make deals with people. This is the nature of politics. For me, it's the hypocrisy and the turning of a blind eye to everything that's going on in your nation. You want to extol it as some paragon of virtue of what a country should be like,
Mm,
and it's nothing like that. It couldn't be further from the truth. Um, you know, where people are dying
mm,
because they can't afford health care.
mm,
And it's not that you can't afford to give them health care,
mhm.
it's that you choose not to give
Yep.
people health care.
Profit, profit,
And to be
profit.
honest, most of the ills that we find going on in the world are not because humanity cannot provide,
Mhm,
it's that it
mhm.
chooses not to provide.
Yeah, yeah.
I think we've already been through, you know, how much food is produced, and the fact that humanity already produces enough to feed everyone. They choose
Mhm.
not to. The fact that there is enough wealth and resources for everyone, but we allow a few to hoard it all.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, so
In the name of capitalist ideals. Yeah.
yeah, and often the people that Western nations point to as the boogeyman
Mm,
are actually people of color
mm.
that might be doing some heinous actions, but are actually of benefit to the majority of the people in their countries.
Yeah.
Whereas what you find in a lot of Western nations is that the actions that their leaders take are in the interest of the few.
Mm. Yeah. Indeed. Indeed. Yeah, I think it's important for us to keep balance. I think especially for those of you that follow kind of a biblical model and narrative and want to have a look at world events within that context, it's really important to not lose sight of the fact that the world corrupted kind of political system needs us to stand and hold it into account, and to not allow headlines like this that are literally being fed. We're being fed our xenophobic, racist ideologies through these types of headlines, because they play on ideas that they've been fleshing out over time. You know, Muslims are bad, Middle East people can't govern themselves, all of those narratives, and that builds into us this picture of what to expect. And instead, we just need to pause. And when they say, oh, but you're not allowed to protest, you think, well, but in my country y'all just passed this law, so that can't be right. The freedoms of women, we've spoken extensively about how women are not free within Western cultures. There is a misnomer that there is this freedom. You know, we've spoken about France, in which they talk about the freedom, but if you're a Muslim woman, it's quite the contrary. You cannot have freedom to choose what you wear because the French dictate what you wear. You know, so there's this idea that, you know, we, especially I think within Western European countries, or within I don't even know why we call it the West, but anyway, it's a whole different issue. Within this kind of European basis countries, you have these ideas that those people are the problem, when actually you need to assess what's happening in your own country and spend less time worrying about those people and more time concerned yourself with what's happening inside your own governments and holding them to account. But as I said, it's his first tour in the Middle East, and he's doing his thing. So there you go. That will break some barriers today, and there will be many people who'll be upset by that picture, but there'll be other people who celebrate it. I think we just need to see it within the context of, actually, is Biden doing what he's supposed to do in his own country? Are we holding those systems to account when then you've got a lot of nerve to go to somebody else's country and tell them that they're not doing it, to be honest?
Listen, I'm here for the tears today.
Okay, well, tears or not, there have been many tears shed this week, because Sir Mohammed Farah of the UK has done a documentary in which it's revealed that he was actually he came to the UK as the product of child trafficking. Now, for those of you that don't know, we haven't done a real episode on child trafficking. It's a huge global problem. People trafficking, particularly, is now one of the biggest criminal activities again. And so it used to be drugs in that way, but people are far more lucrative, and now smuggling people becomes more lucrative, and there is more criminal elements. And Sir Mohammed Farah, I enjoy saying this because it gives me great delight, has revealed in this documentary, he's done a whole documentary on how he came to the UK, and the fact that he was actually trafficked to the UK, and he was a slave effectively for a family. His identity was stripped. He was stolen from his mother after his father had died. They got separated. And it's only in the last months that he's been able to connect to his mum, his birth mother, and find out that his birth mother is alive, and his brother is alive, and his family are still living. He is from Somaliland, and so therefore, you know, there's all of these different elements. But of course, we collectively held our breath, because Sir Mohammed Farah is a UK resident, and the UK government have some very interesting laws surrounding your nationality and surrounding your citizenship, and they can revoke your citizenship if it is deemed that you have lied in any way. And of course, his name is not Mohammed Farah. I need to find his name on the piece of paper I'm reading. I'm sorry, I don't have it to hand. But Hussein, thank you.
And his mama named him Hussein, so I gonna call him Hussein.
Well, he goes by his trafficked name, and has gone by his trafficked name, and he lived in fear for a very long time. His wife talks about the fact that, you know, it was just heartbreaking thinking he was 9 years old when he was trafficked. He's younger than my children. He's a child. He was a baby, and thinking about how scared he would have been, the fact that he was in slavery and having to do all of this manual labor and no one knew until he got into his later teens. And then he confided in a teacher, and the teacher helped him to get out and into the foster system, in which then comes this, miraculous turnaround, of course, in which he finds some solace in sport. And he does so well. He wins 4 Olympic titles, and of course is given the title of Sir by the UK, by the Queen. And so the Home Office has revealed that it will not be taking action over Mohammed Sir's nationality. And the reason given, and I want people to really understand this, because we've had the Windrush scandal and they have not done the same thing. So apparently you need 4 Olympic medals in order to be able to go to have your citizenship not called into question. It is assumed that children are not complicit when their citizenship is gained by deception. Now, bear in mind, we have done on this show lots of episodes where we have talked about the Windrush generation, children of that generation whose citizenship was revoked, not because they had done, anything or that there was any criminal actions, but because the Home Office did something intentional to remove it. But of course, I'm so happy that Mo Farah has actually come forward and talked about this experience, because it does put the experience of child slavery right back onto the table. It breaks these ideas that people are intentionally, as children crossing, parents are said, his mother has been desperate and didn't know that he was doing well, that had not been able to connect with him. And so these ideas that we have about who these people are, is so ridiculous. So it's a really powerful story. The documentary will be on the BBC, of course, and you can see it there, but it's an interesting one.
Right. So you clearly missed the movie reference when I said his mama named him Hussein, so I don't call him Hussein. It's from Coming to America, the barbershop scene.
Yes.
Where they're talking about Muhammad Ali. Look, here's the moral of this story. People, when you come to the UK, don't tell the truth in your application. Lie. Because if you get kicked out, your children get to stay. That's the moral of the story. Because the Windrush generation came and told the truth, and their children got kicked out.
Well, his mother never came. He was stolen and trafficked.
Yes, but my point is, so saying if a child comes and the application is made deceptively, the child does not bear responsibility for that.
Indeed.
So the child gets to stay.
Yes, indeed.
Right? But the children of people who came legally and told the truth,
yes,
are being kicked out. So the moral of the story is, don't tell the truth.
The moral of the story is hold our governments to account and make sure that this double standard does not continue to exist. Please do better.
You say tomato, I say tomato. You say tomato, I don't care.
I think the other moral of this story is we are the UK particularly is currently in a very anti-immigrant, anti-refugee, especially from places like Somalia, especially boys from places like Somalia. They are very, very much, all the news stories you see are very anti those people. And what Mo Farah has done is said, I am that person. What you're saying isn't true. And it's really brave, because they could have revoked his citizenship. They could have taken away his title, and they could have sent him packing. They're not going to do that because he has 4 gold medals, I'm sure. And I
don't know about that. Listen, I think Priti Patel is sitting in the pilot seat on a plane at Heathrow runway, waiting to fly the man to Rwanda. She's just trying to find a way to take the medals away from him. Make no bones about it. That woman would love to get him out of the country. and is probably trying by any means necessary to do so.
For those of you who are watching for the first time, Priti Patel has a history of trying to figure out ways of doing the wrong thing constantly when it comes to issues of immigration and other things, but we have that on the show. But I think it's really important for people who maybe don't have a reference point for someone in that. So what does child trafficking look like? And his story is compelling, you know, being separate, you know, his father dies, being separated from his mother, being taken, and the person just threatening him, listen, we're going to kill your family, so you best just close your mouth. You are who you are. We're taking you to the UK. And then putting him into servitude. And only years later, him being just about brave enough, as he's doing quite well in sport, to do this. And it also brings up an issue which we talk about, which is the model minority. You know, what does it mean to be a world majority person in a country in which you're a minority? And most definitely inhabited this model minority. Is a 4-time Olympic medalist. He's very proud of where he comes from and what he's overcome, and you know, whatever. But we have also got the headlines that will read the complete opposite. And whenever he's run, it's British and it's Britain #1, da, 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 not acknowledging, of course, his ethnicity or any of that. But should you commit a crime, should you be on the other side of the thing, you are no longer British and you are only your ethnicity. And so you have all of these things come into play. I'm really pleased to see the story because it has reminded me that we do need to do something on child trafficking in our next season. It is an important issue that we need to talk about more openly and more freely. Your moral of the story is slightly different.
Listen, the man came out and said, look, I ain't who you think I am. You know, credit to him for that. And as you say, there could have been consequences, and there possibly will still be consequences for him. As I said, Priti Patel is in that pilot seat now, right? That jet is fueled, engines primed. I think what he has said and done is important, as you say, to the narrative of what is happening, and putting a face to the immigrants that are coming over, or the asylum seekers or refugee seekers, actually, that are coming over through the channel, that the current British government wants to turn the boats back into the ocean against international law, that they want to send to Rwanda, which might be against British law. Look, the reality is we have in the UK a government of lawbreakers, otherwise known as criminals. And I think, yeah, look, yeah, I applaud what he's done. I do applaud what he has done. And I know I make light of it, and I make jest and jokes about it, but it is important what he has done.
It is, and it does raise a really important topic, which is modern day slavery. You know, a lot of us, I think particularly even from the diaspora, because of the history of chattel slavery and because of what we've been through, kind of the relief that no longer exists. But we forget that slavery hasn't stopped. That, you know, that hasn't ended people's enslavement, and in fact, it has taken a turn in a way that has made it. You know, when we talk about women being trafficked, when we talk about children being trafficked, when you talk about slavery within the mines that make your mobile phones, for the cobalt, all of those different things, all of those different elements that actually sustain daily life. You know, slavery is a part of our daily life and daily experience. It takes a lot of intentionality to actually not be a party to that system. You know, for him to come out and say it was me. And I also think that because, and this is an issue that I think is really different, but really does need to be said, a lot of times when I hear the stories about boys, particularly boy children, crossing the oceans, and they are from different African nations, one of the things is said, these men are coming here, blah, 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 right? And their children, you know, when you look at their ages, they're children, but they look older and they're lying clearly, and da 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 da. You know, there's real attitude surrounding particularly the men who cross, or the boys, the children, the male children who cross. And I think to myself, he's really put a face and said, I was 9. And the fact that as a person of color, he's naming his age and maintaining his childhood, maintaining that he was a child slave, is so powerful and important, because we know the statistics tell us that when white people look at black boys and girls, they age them by about 4 to 5 years, and adultification is a really dangerous weapon that's used. So you're talking about a 9-year-old who would have been judged to be 14, and at that point his childhood would have gone. But the fact that he's saying he was 9, and people are listening to him and saying he was a baby, he was a child, I have 9-year-olds, you know, and having that conversation, I think is really powerful, because it can have a wide impact on how people view boy children who have been trafficked, boy children who are coming to seek refuge. Instead of seeing them as threats and enemies, you're seeing a child, and therefore the children should be afforded their childhood, instead of being like, but they're adults already when they're 9. You know, I think that's just a really important element to the story as well.
Yeah, I just want to pick up on a point. Listen, let me just be clear. There is no way anybody can think slavery is not happening today. Have you seen what the minimum wage in the UK is?
We in Europe have a different minimum wage. So for those of you that live in the UK, we pray for you. The minimum wage is really bad, but the minimum wage isn't anything. You know, let's be real. There is also slavery, right? There is also people
No,
who don't.
there is.
And I
There
think
absolutely is.
let's not
There
conflate
absolutely is.
the travesty of living below the poverty line in the UK, where you have to work 40 hours plus claim benefits to make it, is a travesty, and it should
But
be
the
addressed.
reality is, most people, or a lot of people, aren't even making it. It is tantamount to a form of slavery. You can't afford to do. Um, you can't afford to eat. You can't afford to keep your children alive. You can't afford to pay your utility bills. But it is necessary. You don't have a choice as to whether you go out to work or not, right? And people say, oh, you have a choice. No, you don't, especially when you have responsibilities, i.e., children to feed or elderly parents to look after. Those aren't choices.
And
It is.
also a sense of well-being for yourself. Like, it's important, you know, people talk about benefit scroungers and all of that nonsense. But actually, for people's well-being, they want to work. People want to be a part of a productive society, but they can't do that, or they do that at their own peril, because of course then comes the challenges of you still needing to claim benefits, and you still needing to have governmental support, because you're not being paid enough to feed yourself and your children. And then I think what's rich is that people say, well, get a better job. Well, then who's going to do the job that they're doing? The job is obviously necessary. So telling people to get a better job isn't actually changing the system. You need to actually pay people so that they can live, pay their rent, do the things that they need to, because telling them to get a better job just means that they're out of the system, but somebody else has to do that job.
Right. I don't think that the job that everybody's doing is necessary. Let's be real here. Not all jobs are necessary. And we have reached a point in society where we have the technology to automate these jobs, and a lot of jobs are automated, but we could automate a lot more jobs. It's this false notion that everybody has to work 40-hour weeks, when the reality is you could cut down the working hours and the world would still work. There'd still be enough production to, to sustain things and to feed everybody. And so the reality is, as I said, there was an economist decades ago, probably the best part of 100 years ago, that came up with this theory. And he set out markers, societal and economic markers, that he said humanity would need to meet in order to ensure that everybody in in the world could be taken care of and their needs could be met. We passed those markers back in the 1980s, right? And productivity and efficiency has only increased.
Yes. And, but that's not true of the whole world. So there's been a study this week that's been released in the Netherlands. In the Netherlands, it says you will work longer was the headline. The strapline is you're going to work longer. And then everyone says, but read the article, because the catch is that while you will work longer years, Netherlands work longer typical years than most Europeans, they work far less hours. The average working week is 32 hours. So that already, and that's just that's the average for everybody. And of course the disparity between men and women is different. So of course women were, I think, at 23 hours and men were at 33 or something like that on average. And so you have this disparity with on age, so of child rearing age. Of course that's where the big disparity comes. But there is already countries who are already putting these things into practice. I work a 40-hour week, and I know that for a lot of people, they find that quite shocking whenever I say I work 40 hours. And I couldn't figure out why until the report was, I read the report and I was like, oh, everybody else is working 32. How y'all have those contracts? How do I get one of those contracts? So it's very interesting to see that in practice, where people talk about the work-life balance. And there was another study done this week, another article looked at this idea or this false notion of a work-life balance, and said that the dichotomy is actually incorrect. You are alive, therefore you are living. Working is a part of life, and you need to be able to put work in its correct place. So the idea of work-life balance is a Western construct where work becomes the most important thing, and actually life is the most important thing, and work needs to be put in its place. And 32 hours is roughly what a country like the Netherlands is now aiming for, which is and they're not changing the amount you're earning, but you're working less hours for it. So there you go.
Well, as I said, I'm not sure how long that will be sustained for.
Well, in the current market, it's quite interesting because, of course, you've got all of these conflicting forces coming. So anyone who's astute and is following will know the Netherlands is a small country, let's say. It has a population of roughly around 17 million, but it's at capacity, it's at working capacity for the people who are needed in employment are employed, which means that there is now a shortfall of workers. So there's more jobs than there are unemployed people, and there are more skills necessary than there are the people with those skills. And so they're looking to kind of go outside of their own country to look at neighboring countries to see if that is a model where people can have some flexibility about where they work. But what they're not looking to do currently, it seems, is change the 32-hour week. For the average person, it is a 32-hour week in the Netherlands. And that's an interesting model in terms of looking at the disparity of, say, the UK, where it's certainly 40 plus hours is a working week. The USA, where 60 can be a working week, and beyond. And when I say 32 hours, of course, 32 hours being the lower end, also, is it sustainable for a person on a lower wage to work 32 hours?
Right. And that's why I say
that disparity across the globe is not the same. So, you're talking about in the Netherlands, you can do 32. In the UK, you have to do something like 40 to 50. And in the USA, it's something like 60 to 70 hours a week on the lower wages to survive, not really live, but to survive. But the minimum wages in the Netherlands actually they have a living wage idea, so they protect that. How long it lasts, who knows? They're going towards more capitalistic USA ideas, so watch out, world.
Yeah.
Well, anyway. Completely different story, different direction again. Brittany Griner is back in the news headlines again. We're really happy to see that she's back in the news headlines, that we've got pictures of her. She's doing okay in broad brushstrokes, but she is one of the world's greatest female basketball players, who is actually locked up currently in Russia for deliberately breaking the law, and she has pled guilty to the drug charges. And what we hope that means is that she will be freed. She will be allowed to go home. She will be allowed to return to her home. Because when you read the story, I think it's so... The star's accused of possession and smuggling drugs. But when you actually read what she had some cannabis oil, which is now pretty much legal everywhere. And she had like a small amount. Like, she's not who's she giving that to? Who's that helping? How is that going to help anybody? How is this, how is it making a difference? And while there is, of course, there are laws that are at work, you can't help but think Brittany Griner is going through what is the worst possible situation and timing in history because of the political climate that she's in, because of what Russia are now asking from the USA. In terms of a prisoner exchange and all of these different elements because of the Ukrainian war. She has been caught up in this, and Russia is telling the USA, don't have this in the media, don't have her name, it's going to make it worse if you're politicizing her, while actually requiring the US to release I forget the guy's name, who is convicted of he is convicted of spying charges. Whelan, who is convicted of spying charges, and so they're trying to conflate all of these issues. And I my heart just breaks for her family, because I think it must be so frustrating to try and deal with the governments. And then there's Brittany, who made a mistake, yes. But is it worth going to live the rest of your life in a Russian prison for? No, certainly not. And a fine could have done, and she could have gone about her business. Like, let's be honest, it happens all the time. Fines and going home is a normal way. So I hope that with this coming up again, with it being, there are campaigners, of course, who are really going. Sherelle Griner is organizing the rallies and is doing that. That's Brittany's wife. It's frustrating. It's frustrating to see.
Yeah, look, I have a lot of questions over this story. And, yes, I know she pled guilty, but actually there are reasons for that. It's like
Yep.
The criminal justice system in Russia is on par with the one in the US.
Yep.
Neither are to be trusted, but there are potential benefits of pleading guilty to crimes, even if you didn't commit them. And the hope with the Griner case is that in pleading guilty, she can escape jail time.
Yeah.
And you see that played out in the US. People can plead guilty to charges and escape jail time.
Only if you're not Black.
Yeah. My concern is, as you've just highlighted, that because of her race, she will be discarded because she pled guilty.
Yeah.
People won't look objectively at what is happening in the circumstances.
Yeah.
They'll just be like, oh, she's a drug smuggler, so throw her away.
Smuggling drugs, whatever, not counting that she's an Olympic gold medalist. Thank you very much. She's one of the greats. Yeah.
But they will ignore, or what they will campaign for is people that go to like North Korea and knowingly break the laws over there.
Yeah.
There were a couple of guys from the US not too long ago that did that. I think actually, tragically, one of them died. But no, people from the US have a long history of going to countries and breaking laws. And then because they belong to a certain demographic, people come out and defend their actions. I mean, look, listen, there was I don't know if you heard about this. This was I think it was earlier this week. It was either this week or last week. Some nut jobs decided to ignore the warning signs on the side of a volcano. It may have been Vesuvius. Decided to go up to the lip of the volcano, fell into said volcano, and people had to come and rescue them.
No, I miss this. I only saw the one of the avalanche where the guy was filming the avalanche, and for whatever reason, the filming was more important than his life. And then, of course, the avalanche reaches him, and he has to kind of hide in a rock. And we all questioned whether this was a wise and sensible decision to continue to stand there for the sake of a TikTok video, YouTube video, whatever video you would like.
If you want to endanger your own life, that's fine. Get yourself out of the problem. That's cool. You do you.
Like I keep required help, but I don't know the rest of that story. But I did not hear about going up into a volcano. Why are we going into volcanoes? What is wrong with us? Do you have is there a reason to be in you're just doing it for what, thrill seeking? What is that? Anyway. Okay. Talking of thrill seeking. British water has, since I have been a child, and I'm sure since before, has been a topic of conversation everywhere. Of course, we have the Water Standards Agency throughout Europe that measure the quality of water and do all of those things. And British Water has always had a challenge. And so now the Environment Agency in the UK has said that they would like to jail the water firm bosses for the appalling pollution that they are putting into the English water systems. So this is particularly within the English water systems. We see this, I know if you're British, you would know these conversations every year. Which beaches get the clean? How bad is the Thames at the moment? Are they managing to clean the Thames at any point? These are all the waters around the Merseyside are conversations, the waters on the other side. I mean, water obviously is an island, so water is a massive factor for the life. It goes around the whole side, but it also has lots of rivers and lots of water, lots of canals, and water in the UK has been a sore spot because it is often green and shockingly polluted, and so these are really bad. So Southern Water, not surprisingly, had the highest rate of total pollution incidents per 10,000 square kilometers in 2020. But Southwestern Water was just below that. And all of the companies are in hot water, meaning that the Environmental Agency is now at the point where it just says jail. That's the only explanation. These are such criminal actions done by these companies that jail is the only fitting response, Mr. Storm.
Look, when the fines for these water companies are often less than the amount that the CEO is making in a year, why are water companies going to listen? I think the Environmental Agency is absolutely right. The fines aren't working. And listen, I don't believe in fining companies anyway, because the cost of a fine is always going to be passed on to the consumer. Yeah. And ultimately, who bears the brunt is the average person. I am all in favor of jailing CEOs and board members. Stick them in jail.
Yeah.
Throw them in jail. Or even better, here's the thing. If you're going to say that a company is a person, throw the company in jail. Stop them trading for however long that is.
Yeah.
If the average person breaks the law and commits a crime, they go to jail.
Mm-hmm.
Throw the companies in jail.
Absolutely.
Or you turn around and you say, look, okay, because you can't physically throw a company in jail. What you turn around and say is, well, they go to company jail. Company jail is whatever you make for your running costs are done, and anything above your running costs goes into the public purse.
Voila.
And that is a policy that stays in place for X amount of years. Whatever the time period that, you'd say is fitting for the crime.
Yeah.
And
that money is then used to clean up some of these problems, especially within water. As I say, water in the UK is a yearly, every year there is some debate over the water in the UK, and there have been recent moves to clean up the Thames, I know, and that has actually been going very well. But on the other hand, they are fighting the tide of pollutants from the same water company. It's disgusting. It beggars belief. And again, this is about profit before people. And I think we need to keep that in mind. Is your profit more important than the people that you're serving or you're working with? And if that is the case, then we have a problem. And it's good to hear the Environmental Agency took such a stand, because there are other environmental agencies, I think we spoke about this last week, who are being told they basically don't have a job anymore. Laws are passed that make them null and void. What is the Environment Agency of the USA going to do now that their power's been taken away to actually do anything?
Yeah,
it's bizarre.
Listen,
It's so
laws
bizarre.
are null and void in the US.
It's bizarre.
Common
it's a
sense,
bizarre country.
intelligence, integrity,
So
all of these things are null and void over there.
Right. So what I want to do is I'm going to summarize 3 stories for you, because I want to do them very quickly. Because there's been some breaking news that I think is really important, and also we have 2 other stories to get to, so I'm mindful of time, so let's go. Firstly, out of the UK, the former pandemic minister has said the UK is not prepared for another pandemic. So people of the UK, the COVID numbers are rising around the globe, particularly 30% in a week in the UK was the jump. I can't remember what the jump is within the Netherlands and within Belgium and France, but the jumps are increasing. There are more and more people who are being found to have COVID. And while some people will say, well, it's not having the effect it was having at the beginning, remember, this is a mutation virus, so it can mutate and it can do something damaging, and people are ending up in hospital. So watch out, please be mindful, please do the measures that help, but know that your government is not prepared for a pandemic, which means that you have got to take responsibility for your own actions, something that we're not fond of doing, as the last pandemic showed. Any thoughts?
Yeah, well, look, of course the UK isn't prepared. They still got Boris Johnson as prime minister.
They do.
And to be honest, none of the candidates to take over are any better. In fact, someone tweeted, some people are going to find this tweet offensive, but as I said, I woke up and chose violence. Someone tweeted that leaving Boris Johnson in power until you find a replacement is kind of like leaving Harold Shipman as a doctor until the health authorities can find a replacement doctor.
Okay. Next story. There's been a 10-year investigation done into why the Muslim community has a higher unemployment rate than its white counterparts for equal education, so on and so forth. And one of the things that had been touted for many years, and I didn't know this, I actually didn't know that this was being held against people, is that actually it's, well, this isn't surprising. So the UK has this idea that it's the Muslims' fault because they have old school values and traditions and religious ideas which make them too rigid to employ. So no surprise to anyone who watches the show and who takes any kind of integrity. The opposite is actually true. What the 10-year study, it's a longitudinal study, so what it found was that people had bias and prejudice and racism, and that is what is stopping or keeping people who would otherwise be employed if they were something else other than Muslim, or Muslim sounding even, they would be employed otherwise. But it is racism and prejudice that keeps them from being employed. There is no surprise there, but I guess for the community that it affects, this is really a vindication moment, because of course you can say all of these things, but when a report says it and you have the facts, it makes you feel vindicated that the point you're making is being heard at least by someone, and one can only hope that that does something for their community.
Yeah, this is no surprise here. And the reality is, Muslims will struggle in the workplace in the UK to progress. And what people are really talking about in that they struggle to get along is that they don't buy into the drinking and alcohol culture that goes along with the UK working environment. So pretty much every evening, people are going out for drinks, after work drinks, but especially on Fridays.
Yeah.
And they will go out and they will get hammered.
Yeah.
And Muslims will be like, well, we don't drink, so we don't really see what the point is, because all you're going to do is go get drunk, make fools of yourself, and we'd rather not do that. Right?
But, you speak to something that go on.
The problem is, when you don't do that, they say, oh, you don't fit into the environment. You don't fit into the culture. But then you have all these white people coming into work drunk and hungover the next day. And then you have the sober Muslim person, or the sober person. It's not even just Muslims that don't drink, but people come into work sober. And then it will be like they're fully functioning and capable of doing their jobs, but they are the people that aren't given responsibilities, that aren't promoted, that aren't. And so when they say they don't fit into the culture, this is essentially what they're talking about. I worked in a job where there was myself, there was a Muslim guy that worked there, and another friend of mine that short Asian dude. I'll just say that and you'll know, right? And there was this white girl there. And I remember that they promoted her to a management position. And this girl will come in hammered. I mean, absolutely hammered. You would smell the alcohol coming off of her. We described her as Barney from Simpsons because that's how she would speak. That was her actions. And this is a person they promoted to a management position. Now, myself, Muslim guy, and a friend that don't drink, or one of those trio drink, but very rarely, and not to the point of
certainly
getting
not to excess, and certainly not in a working week.
Right. So you're dealing with all of this, but you see who they promoted. Right. And so, as I said, I'm not surprised by any of this.
No, it's not surprising. And I've been in the culture where I've worked in marketing, and that is definitely a culture where what business is done over drinks, right? And so I could only go so far before it was problematic. And I would, speak to bosses, speak to people about, well, how am I going to get around this? What can we do to change the environment? And people looking at you like, there's a need where we go for drinks. You can have an orange juice or an apple juice or whatever, and it will be fine. And it's like, well, no, it's not fine, because actually it's really disconcerting to sit with you as you get worse and worse. And I'm cognizant that you're getting your ability to hold a conversation is getting worse. Your ability to actually have fun and engage is getting worse. It is not fun for me to be in that position. And also, if I'm doing work, I want to just get the job done, and I want to be in a drinking environment. So I've worked in those environments, and it is really tough. And as you say, those are times when you get blamed almost for the action. But that's not the only reason that people will give the excuse. The real reality is they are prejudiced and racist, and that's what it is. It is actually an unfair description of people who otherwise, are academically achieving higher than their counterparts, etc., etc.
Here's the other thing. If I've been in the office all day and I have to go to drinks after office hours, why the hell am I not getting paid overtime? Because if I have to work outside of office hours,
let me tell you,
I still want to be working.
Oh my gosh, let me tell you, that's something. That's a whole conversation right there. You saying stuff right now. Let me just let's look at our next story, which is from John Bolton. Hilarious conversation, except for the fact that it's actually quite serious. conversation. So John Bolton is speaking before the January 6th committee hearings. He is trying to defend the Donald Trump position, so to speak. And in doing so, basically incriminates himself. So for those of you that have watched the movies, I mean, I love action movies. I really enjoy crime shows. I really enjoy all of that. And there are a lot in the crime shows, especially when it comes to the CIA, let's say, out of the States, that talk about their influence within political world standings and the illegal activities that they do and how that comes to being. And, you know, sometimes I think that people say, well, it's just a movie. And of course, it's just a movie. But here comes John Bolton and basically says, there is no way you can call January 6th a coup, trying to take over, because coups take planning, and I've done the planning for a coup. I've done that planning. I've overthrown, not obviously ours, but other governments, and meddled in their affairs. And this mess of, you know, Trump just flying from one event to another and trying to do what he's doing is nowhere near. You just can't label it. And it beggars belief, because quite frankly, what did you just confess you did? Sorry? Which governments should we? I think we should just pause and launch an investigation into that point and arrest you and shut down the agency. Maybe that's the way to go. I don't know. But you had this story, Mr. Storm, so go ahead.
Yeah, well, John Bolton's position is laughable, because what he's saying is so he is actually in agreement that Donald Trump sent the people down to the White House.
Yes.
Right? So he thinks Donald Trump is guilty of that. But he says it's not a coup because it wasn't organized enough. Well, guess what? If I plan to go and murder someone and just did a crappy job of it, I still conspired to murder someone. My competence is not an indicator of what the crime is.
It was really laughable. He should be held to account for his actions of, you know, jumping from one thing to another and just flying by the seat of his pants. But you can't call that a coup. I was like, what are you saying right now?
Right. So one, the competence of someone does not determine whether an act is criminal or not. And the other thing is, he confessed to being a participant and actively planning coups in other countries. That goes against international law.
Immediately we need to deal with that.
Once again, I'm going to question who is putting in the warrant for his arrest. Which one of these countries that talk about freedom and rights are putting in the request? Because what I want to know is, how is this different to what the US and European nations are accusing Russia of doing?
Well, there you go. Right? It's like, what did you say? What did you do? Yeah, no, somebody needs to hold this to account. Somebody needs to clearly send out, as you say, an arrest warrant. And while we're on the subject of arrest warrants, the UK Defence Minister is going to be bringing that up next. That's our next story. If you don't have anything else to say about John Bolton's
listen, the man's a clown. The man is a clown.
I'm laughing, but it really beggars belief.
No, but you have to understand, the man is a clown, and he was a member of Trump's cabinet. And if you want to know why that country is so bad, look at John Bolton. Right? He was not competent enough for the position that he was placed in. Mm-hmm. He was not suited for it. He did not have the skills for it. He did not have the talent for it. But that was a money appointment. And by that, I mean, John Bolton is a warmonger. And the U.S. economy functions off the petrodollar and war. Yeah. Right? Very much so. And so that's where you have John Bolton, because he was in favor of invading. You name the country. I swear the man had a map up on the wall and would throw darts at it to pick which country he was thinking of invading next.
It did seem so.
Or what country he would do a coup in. And there was actually a reporter, I can't remember from what publication it was, who actually spoke about the countries that Bolton was actively involved in planning coups for. And he listed about 6 different ones.
Anyway, it really is something out of a movie script. To me, it feels like very much I was watching something out of, it's like the moment when and I wouldn't want to compare Black Widow to John Bolton, but when she sits at the UN and she does the "yes, we did it" and kind of moment, it felt very much like that's what I was watching. Is this a Marvel movie? Is like the superhero is going to come out now? What is this? What is this madness that you are talking about? And just revealed all of their mess. But in this case, incriminated himself, and the question does become who will arrest him. That's really got to be the question. And will those 6 to whatever, however many countries it is, get some reciprocity? Will they get some? Yeah. Will they have the Americans come out of their country, basically? Anyway, that's something to think of. So as I said, we're going to go on to the second to last story, because there has been breaking news, which I do want to bring out today because it is important breaking news. But the second to last story is the UK Defence Minister has hinted that the UK government is considering a further inquiry or a review of a pattern of 54 allegedly suspicious killings by SAS soldiers in Afghanistan. Speak slower. Speak slower, Tabitha. Speak slower. Enunciate. Basically, there was a BBC Panorama documentary into suspicious killings by SAS soldiers. And the Defence Minister has hinted that he's not ruling out any sort of inquiry. It's clear that public or judge-led inquiry has not been ruled out. The evidence obtained in the Panorama documentary was previously confidential internal Ministry of Defence files. So therefore, it concluded that there was a number of incidents. Now, I haven't watched the Panorama documentary, so I cannot speak to it. But I think this continues this level of criminality within Western cultural norms, and what they're allowed to get away with, and why people are angry. I think, let's be honest, the people of these regions are angry not because you came and gave them freedom, but because you came and broke their laws, because you came and did heinous actions in their countries. You bombed when you weren't supposed to, and killing. So they talk about the fact that male detainees were frequently taken away from captured family groups and killed after they were said to have unexpectedly produced a grenade or a gun. So, oh my goodness, we're so surprised after we've snatched them up from their family. They mysteriously managed to have a grenade. We had to kill them. I'm sorry. No grenade or gun is found, of course. And it continues to highlight these serious failings. Now, this is just something that I think is completely heinous. And it's glad that they're going to investigate. Maybe they're going to investigate. I mean, it's off the table, but it's also not on the table.
No, they're not going to investigate, because what you have to understand is that the cases that Panorama have highlighted were already cases that the Ministry of Defense said it had investigated and found no wrongdoing in. Right? So now the Ministry of Defense are saying they're going to investigate, but this is so that they can seize the evidence that Panorama have. And they're claiming that they need it for their investigation, but they're not going to investigate. They've already done it and said, hey, there was no wrongdoing. Now, here is the madness in this all, right? I think it was 64 cases Panorama highlighted.
Yeah.
64 cases. Now, these 64 cases were part of a bigger group of 600 cases that the Ministry of Defense investigated. And in those 600, not one single claim of wrongdoing was upheld.
That's quite amazing. It's
Now, the
quite
law of averages says you're going to have
somebody
at
would
least
come.
one.
At least one. Yeah. But somehow you investigating yourself has led to the conclusion that you're okay. Surprise, surprise, surprise. I'm so surprised by this outcome.
Right.
Same
So,
across the globe.
yeah, look, I think we need to recognize that this is smoke screens and mirrors that are going on. There is no genuine intention to investigate. And if they did, they would do what Australia did when Australia faced these allegations, and they set up an independent judge led inquiry. And the judge investigated and actually found there was a number of incidents that were wrong. Right. And in the Australian case, they had a much smaller sample to work with. So if you're finding incidents of wrongdoing in a much smaller sample, and when I say much smaller, it was at least half the size, right?
Yeah.
Of the UK one, if not even smaller. And you're finding a significant number of wrongdoings. I think they found 30 something cases of wrongdoing in that, or 20 something. It was either 20 something or 30 something cases of wrongdoing in the Australian incident. You can't expect me to believe that in 600 you cannot find one case which meets the criminal level.
Well, and I think this, as I said, it speaks to a wider issue in which army police across the globe, in Eurocentric countries, particularly get away with many different criminal actions on the basis that they are investigating themselves. And if you're investigating yourself, you're never going to hold yourself to account. And that's the reality. There has to be some outside party. We spoke about this when we even spoke about issues to do with the church and abuse. When an outside body comes in and does the investigation, it finds the truth, and that, you know, can be very liberating and heartbreaking and all of those things. But you have your own investigation in which you have your bias. You're already at a propensity to say we are doing okay. Then you're gonna want to label it okay. And wasn't it just recently we had a news story? Wasn't it this week? In fact, we were discussing this news story where they were saying that the police were investigating themselves, and the premise of the investigation from the police unit was to say that they wanted to put the police officers in the best light possible. Wasn't it this week? I can't remember which country this was in. It was like, well, of course you do, because you're talking about people you work with. You're talking about you train for the same job. These are your colleagues. Of course you want to put them in the best possible light. That doesn't mean that they didn't do something wrong. And you obviously can't be trusted to investigate yourself then. Somebody else needs to do that. Somebody else needs to hold you to account because you clearly can't do it for yourself. It's a very similar thing. I think what's amazing to me, and is still amazing to me, is that Panorama's still on. Despite all of the, Panorama have revealed, we've talked about many things that the Panorama have broken as stories, and Panorama still get to make shows. I think it's quite spectacular that we still have this investigative body who are still able to do that in the 21st century in the UK, where they're trying to shut down every kind of voice that you have. I think it's quite something to behold.
Soon come. It's only a matter of time.
Look, well, we'll campaign for it to long may it live, because otherwise you don't get to hear any of this stuff if it wasn't for Panorama, I think. Look, you certainly aren't hearing it on the BBC News, let me put it like that.
I think one of the things that I want people that watch this podcast, and thank you for watching, people, but one of the things I want you to understand is that when Western nations go into other countries with their military forces, they're not going to give these countries freedom. They're going into those countries to give them the exact same crappy system that you have in yours.
Yeah.
Right? If they were going in these countries to give them freedom, they would leave and let the country make whatever mistakes they were going to make.
Yeah.
That's assuming that their choices are mistakes.
Yeah.
Right? But that is what freedom is. But they're not doing that. They're going in there to give them the same crappy system that you have because that allows them to have power, control, and influence.
Yeah.
So let's just get rid of this notion of freedom. Whenever we talk about another country using its military power against another, just know it has absolutely zero to do with freedom.
Indeed. Indeed. So the final story for today, and as Mr. Storm says, a massive thank you for everyone who sticks with us and goes through this. We're going on a summer break. But the final story for today just broke literally as I was sitting here.
I actually have a story after we finish this one. I think it's a real Darkside story, but I'll let you finish.
Okay, well, all right. Uvalde school shooting. There has been an investigation. The initial report was published today from the House of Representatives, and it says that there are systematic failures and egregiously poor decision making by those who were involved in the response to the shooting. I have finally got to watch not the children's side of it, but the video image of the shooter. It was horrific to watch. Police officers literally standing there, and you're knowing you guys have got, I mean, seeing them with the weapons, the firepower, everything, and just looking at them just stand there. They didn't try to get kids out. They didn't try to do anything. Was horrendous. I cannot imagine what the tragedy of these families is. So, of course, the committee has put out an 80-page report. This is an initial report into what's happened so far, and it concludes that the school did not adequately prepare for the risk of an armed intruder. But it also, which I find to be ridiculous, if you go across the globe, unless you work in a school that has active shooter alerts, and I've worked in a school that has active shooter alerts. So I worked in a school in the Jewish community, and they have active shooter alerts. They have active problems there, and therefore we have, complete lockdown. Most schools, kids are allowed to leave the rooms. They're not locked in. So the fact that you're saying that, they weren't prepared for an attacker. What do you mean? There shouldn't be an attacker. Different point altogether. But what they do say, at the very least, is that it was shocking failures, and it was systemic, and it was egregious failures by the those who were responding to the shootings there. So, my heart goes out to the families of the 19 children and 2 teachers, because this is going to be horrendous, and it will keep going. And the blaming of the teachers and the blaming of the schools and not putting the blame where it belongs, I think is just a horrendous situation. And your heart can't help but bleed for those who have to endure this. We live in a country where our children's doors are very much open, and the school is very much easily accessible and walkable. They have a culture of having children are sacred, and you don't have these sorts of situations. And of course, guns are very heavily restricted, so active shooters are not a norm for our society. But to live in a society where you want to blame not only of course, the teachers who risked their life to save their children and died in that process, but you're also going to blame the whole school and the janitor and all of those people, which is ridiculous, when clearly this young man should not have had a gun and should not have been able to do that, and you should have acted quicker to deal with him. And it is it really is horrendous. And so I do feel for the families as these reports continue to come out and CCTV continues to come out, and they begin to see how horrific it was, and how their children will be living, the children that survive are going to be living with the nightmares, the horrors of hearing those screams, of hearing the bullets flying, and it's like they will have PTSD and will be living through war zone kind of memories. It's just a very sad situation. So that was my final story, but Mr. Storm has a real dark side story.
Let me just comment on this. What I find, because I watched a video of the police and the police's actions in all of this
CCTV stuff that was revealed this week. It was horrible.
What, for me, what is so egregious in policing in the United States is that police are allowed to claim they were so in fear of their lives that they can shoot unarmed people
This
while
point right here.
simultaneously being able to claim they are so in fear of their lives that they cannot do anything.
Right, right, right.
Right? You have that story of that black guy that was shot 40 times, 60 times just a couple of weeks ago.
Mm,
That came out just a couple of weeks ago,
mm-mm.
right?
No, Jesus.
He was unarmed
Mm, mm,
and they were so in fear of their lives, they
mhm,
shot him 60 something times,
mhm, mhm, mhm,
right?
mhm,
But they were so in fear of their lives here that they could not act until 19 people are dead.
mhm,
And these police officers, they
mhm.
had assault rifles, they had handguns, they had shotguns, they had
They had
big
everything.
fat bulletproof shields, they
Shields,
had body
armor.
armor, they had everything,
It was awful.
but they could not act to save anybody's life. And I look at it and I'm like, no wonder people in the US want to be police officers. That's a cushy job
Yeah,
where you can claim whatever you want
yeah,
and it is accepted as
yeah,
gospel truth
yeah.
because you are so afraid you have to act. You are so afraid you cannot act,
Mhm, mhm, mhm.
right? But the one thing you are not concerned about that is not motivating you is the welfare and well being of other people.
Right.
And I am of the school of thought that that is what policing is about.
Mhm,
It is
mhm.
about the welfare
Okay.
of
And well-being of others.
individuals
Mhm,
and communities,
mhm, mhm.
right? So yeah,
Yeah.
I look at this story and I'm just like, if this isn't a reason
Mm.
to scrap the policing system and start again, I don't know what is. And people are going to get confused in the messaging of defund the police. Fine. Let me just say, don't defund the police, scrap them and start again,
Mm. Yeah.
right? Because
Systems in place that
what
actually work.
you, people are so caught up in the idea that you have to have police. Okay, let's have police, but let's have one that is actually effective.
Yeah. Let's start again. Let's just go ground up. Let's just nullify it and then start with something in place. And I think what's heartbreaking on top of that is the fact that, as you say, there's this, I was so afraid for my life, I shot them, and I was so afraid for my life, I did nothing. What's interesting is that people, when they're defending the police, say, but it's a really difficult job, the everyday fear for your life, blah, 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 blah. And of course, police, that is an element of policing but you go into that knowing that's what you're doing. You
Mhm.
should, by rights, go into that knowing that you need to conquer your fears, you need to manage your fears better, and you need to have training in order to do that. And of course, that's obviously not being done.
Mhm.
They don't have long enough training to even encompass anything to talk about the kind of actual element of actual fear that they will be dealing with. Because, there is no doubt that I would be afraid if I was faced with a gunman, but I would also, if you're the police officer, as you say, it's the well-being of everybody else. And you had parents who were pushing to get in to take this guy down and who knew they would die in the process, but were willing to do that. But the people with the body armor, the bulletproof stuff, and the were standing there and even were on their phones and were doing all sorts of other things. Instead of going in and protecting those children, they weren't getting kids out. They just weren't doing anything.
Nope.
Um,
And they'll get a
and
medal for it.
I hope that entire system is shut down and they start again. That's the only thing I can say for Uvalde and other states where these things are true. That I hope that you shut this down and say, let's start again. What is the purpose of policing? What are we actually doing? How can we achieve that the best? Let's have the training that matches what we need to do, and let's do that instead. And if you were a former police officer and you believe that this is what you earn, but you have to undergo the training, you have to be retrained, you have to go, because we're not just going to sign you up one for one. Like, we're not closing down this and re-employing you there, right? So it sounds good in practice, but a lot of times what ends up happening is we just close down this one and we re-employ the same people, and then we still have
you give it another name. But the reality is you cannot polish a dog turd, right?
Yeah. So your dark side story for today.
So that's the first thing. And the second thing I want to say, still on the Uvalde thing, is that for me, I look at it and I'm like, you're blaming the school. If you're blaming the school for not having an active shooter policy, and that's something that's considered to be normal or standard, it says a lot about your society, right? My children, when they went to primary school, there was a red line that the children could not cross over. That was it. There's no fence, there's no nothing. There's just a red line painted on the pavement, on the sidewalk, right?
The culture shock.
And the children are told, you can't go past there. But guess what? I would roll into the school whenever I wanted to. Other parents would roll into the school whenever they wanted to. Oh, my child forgot such and such. I'll just go into the school and stick it in my bag. I'll just go into the school and do this.
Live the lunch.
You know what? My child has an appointment today. I forgot to tell him. Let me just go to his classroom and pick him up. That's the society that my children have grown up in. And that
people's do too.
That, people, is what freedom is.
Yeah.
Freedom is the ability to make your choices and to be safe doing so.
Yeah. Yeah.
Not that you don't bear the consequences of your choices, but you are safe to make those choices.
Mm-hmm.
And sending your children to school, to primary school, should not be a decision or a choice that comes with hazards, such as, does my school have an active shooter plan?
It's outrageous. Outrageous. It's outrageous. I mean, I remember the culture shock because, schools in, I think that UK schools have quite a lot of freedom and the kids have freedom of movement and so on and so forth. But of course, there are bells and there's fences and there's walls.
There's electric fences, not electric fences.
There's all kind of barriers.
Gated barriers and
you have to buzz in, but you still have a fair amount of freedom to come and move, but they know who's on site. Come into a country where children genuinely and the society genuinely holds this sacredness of school and childhood as to be true. It was a culture shock. It was really a culture shock to see the freedom that children explore, and to say, wow, if only all children and all families could experience that freedom, could experience that life or death is not going to school. That should not be life or death. That's not the option. And there are many places where it's life or death, USA being one of them. Being a girl in other places is also issues. Life or death is not getting an education and being a child. That's not it. That should not be it.
Right. Yeah. And just to harken back, actually, or to link to an earlier point or earlier story that was made, when you had that campaign a few years ago about schoolgirls that were taken in Nigeria and the publicity that came around it, the question always was, how could this happen? How could you allow it? Where was the security? Where were the police in all of this? Where was this? But you have school shootings like monthly in the USA.
Yeah.
You see that same spotlight you were turning on Nigeria? Turn it on yourselves.
Yeah.
Answer those questions for yourselves before you start pointing the finger and saying other people have issues.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. All right, a real dark side topic. Let's hear it. I'm worried. Right. We're over time. So.
No, I don't understand why you're worried. This will be a quick one. It's a real dark side story for everyone. And actually, I think it's one of the most criminal and heinous things that I have encountered in years.
How is this going to be quick?
Where the hell is the rest of my crunchy? What is this? I mean, I remember when a chocolate bar used to be a chocolate bar. This is more like a chocolate hyphen. I want the rest of my chocolate bar back. So I calling you out, Cadbury. I calling you out. Bring back the rest of my chocolate.
Oh, yes, yes, yes. Thank you. I love it. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Yes, it definitely is. Yes, yes, thank you.
No, but where is it? I mean, look, just for scale comparison, right? Where's my hand? Okay.
And
Scale comparison. It's not even the size of my palm.
sizes of food have decreased over time, and they're still charging you more for the same portion. It's a real dark side topic for sure.
I want my chocolate bar back. This isn't a laughing matter. This is a serious dark side topic. Cadbury's.
Listen, when they put the
Make
glass
my
and a half of milk back in the chocolate, then come talk to me, because all now I'm still vexed with Cadbury's that they've not put a glass and a half of milk. And the reason they said they don't do that no more is because people's taste buds have changed. No, you've saturated everything with sugar. My taste buds don't change. Give me back my glass and a half of milk.
Listen,
Basically, people.
whether my taste buds change or not, give me back my glass and a half of milk in my Cadbury's dairy milk. That's number one. And number two, make my loco and bring it back. You hear me? Bring back the rest of my chocolate.
Back to original recipe, please.
Rotted
We would like
chocolate.
actual chocolate flavor. Well, I would like to give a massive thank you to all of our viewers, supporters, and who have kept us thus far. We are going for a much needed summer break. We hope that your summer is filled with sunshine, laughter, and larger crunchies, clearly, and a glass and a half of milk from Cadbury's.
Listen, it's not just crunchies. Crunchies is just the one that I have
No,
at
listen,
hand
if I
right
get
now.
a twirl bar out for you, it's like this. The twirl is now like
My
here.
whisper bar.
It's just teeny tiny. It's snack size. So we hope that you have laughter. We hope that you have a lot of fun. We will look forward to be back with you in September after our vacation time, after we have rested and recuperated, hopefully. We are wishing you all the best from the dark side. Enjoy the dark side for the summer when it's nice and bright. And for those of you who watch from the winter side of the world, happy winter. I hope your winter is treating you very well and it's not too cold and you're not plowed in with snow and you're not covered with everything. So for those of you in winter at the moment who join in, happy winter. Enjoy the winter break. Have a good one. But we will see you in September for the dark side. Peace. Anything to say?
There can't be no peace till my crunchy come back. The war. I told you. I woke up this morning and chose violence. I want my crunchy back.
Well, on that note, a massive thank you once again to all of our viewers, everyone who watches this back, everyone who gives us positive feedback. Wherever we go, we get such positive feedback. We are so grateful to all of you who stick with us and enjoy the dark side. Peace. See you in September. Bye-bye.